Good morning and welcome. I'm so excited. This is our third virtual chat discussing faith and resilience from a diverse spectrum of faith leaders. This morning we have Reverend Hayashi from the Ekoji Buddhist Temple in Fairfax. And I looked it up. The temple's name means Temple of the Gift of Light. So I think that's so appropriate. And everything that's happening in the world, all this unrest, I'm very, very excited to explore looking at resilience through the Buddhist eye. So my first question is if you can talk to us about any principles or the beliefs from your faith as a Buddhist, and sort of how is resilience framed within your framework of belief?
So first of all, I want to note that our denomination is called Shin Buddhism, and which is originally from Japan. And as you know, Buddhism has many sects and denominations. So I can only speak from my denomination, but I will try to talk about the fundamental teachings, the fundamental beliefs in Buddhism. So the Buddha explained that things arise from causal relationships in which things originate and things change. In other words, every existence and every phenomena in this world arises through many shifting causes and conditions, and not even a single thing can exist independent and unchanging. And this is the theory of theory of causal relationship is called dependent origination, or sometimes it's called interdependent co-arising. And this is the essence. This is the foundation, the fundamental of the Buddhist teachings. And I would like to talk about three aspects of this belief that forms resilience.
Okay.
So one is this theory of dependent origination teaches us responsibility. Now that most states have entered phase 1 or phase 2, but we often saw on the news a few months ago about people partying regardless of
Yes.
the importance of not gathering in large groups in this time of crisis. In many cases, people who were ignoring the need not to gather together were saying, like, I have the right to do what I want, or I'm not that old, so the virus won't affect me that much, or other such things. And when I was watching the news, a doctor in New York, she has noticed how you can save many lives by staying at home. And of course, there were and there are a lot of people obeying the orders not to gather in groups. And also there are a lot of young people who are aware that they can give the virus, or concerned about spreading it to other people. So these people are acting responsibly. They are, from my perspective, I think they are acting in accord with dependent origination. And then the next aspect of dependent origination is that it teaches us the value of interconnectedness.
Okay.
And interconnectedness means that everyone has some kind of connection to everyone else. And if everyone has a connection with everyone else, everyone has a place in the dynamics of life, and each in its own way sustains life. So in other words, you are part of a great web of interconnectedness. I am part of this great web. Everyone is part of this great web, which means that you are important.
And then is my responsibility then connected partly to be responsible for you as well, naturally, like if you fuse those two principles together?
Yes.
Okay.
And the other, the third aspect of dependent origination teaches us to keep hope.
Mm.
So this theory of dependent origination relates to the truth of impermanence, that everything changes. It is because things changes due to the inevitable causes and conditions. So, even the stars, move due to the universal gravitation. Trees change with the seasons, and even the cells in our body constantly
Yes. Yes.
change. And therefore, we age, get ill, and eventually will die.
Mm-hmm.
But there is another view of impermanence. Impermanence means that, as I said, everything is in constant change and nothing stays forever, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if nothing stays forever,
Mm-hmm.
then the hard situations we experience in life are not set,
Okay.
right?
Well, how do you not be anxious because everything is changing and nothing is permanent? Why doesn't that, from the Buddhist eye, why doesn't that create more anxiety rather than a sense of stability or security, knowing that there's nothing that's permanent? Wouldn't that be a scary principle?
Oh, the truth of impermanence.
Yes.
Um, for some people, yes. But this is the truth that Buddha, awakened to.
Yes.
And he taught that, so we tend to see other things changes, but not us, not me.
Okay.
So, I do, so it's not that I understand impermanence,
Mm-hmm.
but I myself am impermanent. So as
Wow.
long as you say, oh yeah, I understand impermanence, that's the Buddhist truth,
Wow.
right? Then that person does not actually understand, is
Mm-hmm.
resisting. But when you
Mm-hmm.
come to the point that you can understand that, no, it's me,
We are
it's myself,
impermanent.
yes,
Yes.
it's permanent.
Wow. I just
Um,
I felt free just by saying that. You're absolutely right.
right.
Yeah.
And these truth in Buddhism, my opinion is that it has both aspects.
Mm-hmm.
Like the truth of impermanence. Yes, everything changes, so nothing stays forever. So that's how we, as I said, we age and get ill and eventually die. But the other meaning, the aspect of impermanence means that, as I said, nothing is set. So I have a son who is 2 years old, and he's in his the what do you
The
call that?
terrible twos.
Yes, terrible too.
He's challenging everything,
Yes,
learning
yes,
boundaries, and
yes.
yes.
He's pulling out the trash from the trash can. He's pulling out all the books from the bookshelf, and every evening, you know, me and my wife, we have to put all the books back, and it's very stressful, to be honest. But actually, this is when I reflect on the teachings,
Mm.
permanence. And then I could, the more I reflect on myself in that truth, I'll come to think that, yes, it is very hard right now, but this is not going to last forever,
Is
right?
there a particular sutra or canon or another Buddhist sacred text that, in terms of the teachings, that you really rely on or read or nurse a lot when you think about resilience or trying to build resilience, I guess, or
So,
understand it, that we can understand it better? Yeah.
um, when Buddha awakened to the truth, it is said that he taught the truth in 84,000 ways.
Mm.
And
Wow.
I'm not sure if he actually gave 84,000 ways, but so he was like a doctor
Mm.
and saw the disciples and the lay that came to him for guidance as patients. So he gave, the teachings, depending on each person's ability and knowledge and needs. So our denomination follows a sutra called the Three Pure Land Sutras,
Okay.
which is based on the Buddha's wisdom and compassion. But other denominations also follow their own sutras. But
Okay.
so I cannot speak of
No, speak from your faith, from your
right.
like what sutra do you part of that sutra? Yes.
So we follow the Three Pure Land Sutra, which talks about a Buddha called Amida, which is the manifestation of wisdom and compassion. So when we learn about the sutra or learn about the wisdom and compassion, we come to see ourselves. We come to see how we have limited wisdom and compassion. So as we come to see ourselves, we can learn about ourselves, how we see things, how we see the world. And for me, when I reflect on the Buddha's wisdom and compassion, I can clearly see how I resist, that things are impermanent, how, I kind of resist, and I tend to see all the problems in other people. And when I, accept that fact that I try to see all the problems in other people, that's when I kind of, gain my own compassion. So I could see the world in a different way, with a very, open-minded. So I'm no longer stuck with myself.
Yes.
But I'm kind of gradually opening myself and seeing things in a different way. So specifically talking about, this situation we are in, this COVID crisis. So first I was very, had a very negative feeling about this. It's so frustrating. I was building, anxiety.
You're not alone.
Right. But when I reflect on Buddha's wisdom and compassion, and when I reflect on the teachings, I gradually came to see this as an opportunity.
Okay.
To learn that, I'm not alone. I'm not the only one who is suffering. Everyone is in the same situation. So, that's kind of, I take it as an opportunity so that I could kind of, stay positive.
I find it interesting. I like the linkage between compassion and wisdom. I think in many faiths, the sacred text is looked at solely or primarily as sources of wisdom, knowledge. Can we talk about a little bit more, go deeper into sort of the linkage of compassion and resilience? Sort of like why do you think that compassion takes such a prominent role in the actual sacred text of the sutra for Shin Buddhists? And sort of, is there a relationship, is there a relationship of wisdom without compassion? Like, what does that look like in the world? Or is it, compassion a necessary component to being and living in wisdom?
I mean, wisdom and compassion, comes together. So it's never a separate thing. So I'm sorry, I didn't get your question. So
it's okay. Just to talk about compassion, like the fact that it is the sutra is wisdom and compassion. I found interesting, because you can have, there's so much hatred in the world as we're seeing today, and so much a lack of compassion. for others. And so even going back to how we began this sort of the conversation, talking about just how our sense of responsibility to ourselves and to others, it just seems like there's something special there. Having heard the wisdom plus compassion, to me, is a distinction that I've never really heard made prominent in other faiths. So I just wanted to talk about that. It just seems like, just from your perspective, sort of the role of compassion. Why is compassion not separate from wisdom?
That's a good question. So the Buddha's wisdom reveals the truth of human nature. Mm-hmm. And then the compassion, embraces us.
Okay.
So, like, in the case of the incidents that occurred in Minnesota, mm-hmm. So when such tragedy occur, actually this has nothing with Buddhism, but Nelson Mandela,
it's okay. Mm-hmm.
the father of Africa, his words always comes to my mind. Mm-hmm. So he said, the first thing is to be honest to yourself, and mm-hmm. you can never have an impact on society if you have not changed yourself. Mm-hmm. And this is just my opinion, but of course, racism is clearly repugnant. It's wrong. Racism can cause a lot of damage to both individuals and also in communities, right? Mm-hmm. Racism has such mental health impacts as creating feelings of like sadness, anxiety, and depression. Mm-hmm. And also racism also creates a society where people don't trust and respect each other. Mm-hmm. So there's no reasons or excuse for racism. And many think that racism is like prejudice against others that comes from our ignorance of them, and that it is often mixed with anger. Mm-hmm. So racism in such a case is it's our blind attachment to what we know and the unwillingness to open our minds to other possibilities. Mm-hmm. So thought of it in this way, mm-hmm. we might not all be racist, mm-hmm. but we all certainly have anger, ignorance, mm-hmm. and attachments. Mm-hmm. So this is what Buddhism points out. Mm. So we all might have the capacity to do anything given the right circumstances. Mm. So Buddhism teaches, this is the wisdom part that Buddhism reveals. Yes. Our true nature, so that we can be aware of it. Okay. And as we deepen awareness, we learn how to see others with kindness and compassion. Okay. And see the whole world with a new and open-minded. And at the same time, we are able to live life with a very deep sense of gratitude and appreciation to all of life and to mm-hmm. all other people. Mm-hmm. Is there hope that, again, just using the third principle that we shared of Shin Buddhism, that we will have the capacity to actually build a community of compassion, a compassionate community, like, and not just like our individual neighborhood community, but just a community of humanity, like that we do have that capacity to do that in our nature? Yes, we do. Okay. If we reflect upon ourselves. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a key point that Buddhism always talks about. Buddhism really emphasizes. So when something bad really happens, and when I see, this is just my thought, but when I see like something happening in a different country.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's when we have to reflect
Mm-hmm.
ourselves on it. We should not see that tragedy that is happening somewhere else.
Okay.
It may be somewhere else, but you know, we should take it more personally. And we have to see ourselves in, those situations.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that's compassion. It's
Okay.
not like saying that, no, I'm sad, I'm gonna pray. No, that's not enough. You have to reflect yourself in it.
Mm.
So, that's.
What are the challenges to that? Like, how would you help? Or is this totally like an independent thing? Like, is there a way that sort of reflection and that internal work can be done, or built like conscious, or is it something that just naturally happens? Do you know what I mean? Like, you can't take, I don't know, is there a class? I don't know if you can take a class on compassion, like how to be a more compassionate person, but do you know what I mean? But like, how do you actually as an individual go through that process? I liken it to the option of, people say, okay, I want to build this certain strength or this skill. I go to the gym or I take this class. Or is it more like a watchful kind of natural organic thing that grows like a garden? So I use those to kind of juxtapose sort of the process of building that self-awareness, or that the ability to even do those self-reflections when it's needed. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think it's scary. I just remember, like, when I was a teenager and going through issues, it was like I used to write a lot. I still do, but I had like 50 diaries as a child. And so I just remember writing about, when you embark on a certain thought or reflection, you don't really know what you're going to find at the end of that reflection. And so there's like fear there. Like, do I really want to go and take the deep reflection that I need? Because I don't know what I'm going to look like when I get back, or do I even come back? Is it just like, you know what I mean? Like, this just is the unknown, that reflection.
Mm.
From the Buddhist eye, how do you see that self-reflection that's needed to develop more compassion?
So Buddha,
Mm-hmm.
by reflecting,
Mm-hmm.
he eventually attains, enlightenment,
Mm-hmm.
which means that there's a truth there.
Mm.
So yeah, I do understand that, reflecting can actually cause pain,
Mm-hmm.
since, it's hard to see what's going to happen next and how you're going to change. But that attitude itself is, living against the truth, because everything changes, and we may have to change.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, that is a very good question.
I told you, I'm like that kid that asked 20 questions. But I'm genuinely curious. Do you know what I mean? Like, if there's, to me, what I'm receiving is that the one sort of constant reality that everything in life that we're facing, there's a truth in it. There's a truth that guides us. There's a truth that we're heading toward, that sense of understanding. How do we gain the strength and the resilience to go through that journey to reach these truths?
It's the constant listening. It's constant listening to the Dharma, the teaching,
Mm-hmm.
and applying them in our everyday life. So the Dharma means the teaching, but it's not just the teaching. It is my teaching is a teaching that I'm inside. I am inside that teaching.
Mm.
So by listening, constantly listening. So yeah, this is a good question, and it is a question that people often ask.
Okay.
But I think my personal opinion is that Buddhism doesn't see. Actually, Buddhism sees the process itself
Okay.
as a goal.
Okay.
If that makes sense. So
Yes.
if we set a goal, yes, we may ask, okay, what do I do?
Mm-hmm.
Right, and then but it's more about this process that we treasure, that we value, and within that process, we we gain awareness,
That's beautiful.
and we understand who we really are. So in that sense, Buddhism encourages us. Buddhism wants us to understand ourselves, who we are, who we really are. And that occurs from the understanding comes from the constant listening of
Okay.
the Dharma, the Buddhist teachings.
Thank you. That's really beautiful. Before we close, I do want to ask you to close in an affirming way from a Buddhist word or prayer. But before I go, I wanted to see if anyone had any questions you wanted to ask Reverend Hayashi directly. Yes, Roberta has a question. Go ahead, Roberta.
Reverend, yes, thank you so much for your comments. Really appreciate your wisdom, especially at this time. I'm very interested in how many faith groups and many ethnic, racial, national groups from all over the world are rallying around the Black Lives Matter movement. I would love to hear your thoughts from your tradition about how the movement is impacting the Buddhist community.
I actually cannot say much about that issue, but I think it is very important for us to raise our voice and to support the community. But at the same time, as I said many times, that at the same time we have to reflect ourselves. We have to see that the issue is not outside; it's inside us. And as we reflect upon ourselves, I think that's how you really support. That really means to support others. So. That's kind of the Buddhist view, to see yourself in that situation. And personally, what is really important, so I got this email yesterday from this LGBTQ community, asking what our stance is. But what I think, what is very important is that the word itself is the issue. Having the word LGBTQ, it kind of my feeling is that it kind of separates others. Oh, it's about them. So if you say Black life, it's about them. But so I do not like to contemplate on those terms, because it separates me from the issue. So I will tend to see as them, but it's not them. It's about
us as an individual.
Dora,
I definitely understand.
And may I just ask a quick follow-up?
Sure.
So I wasn't intending on looking at it as them, but more looking at it as an international social movement for justice for all.
Mm-hmm.
It has come to represent much more than that, than one. And so
Yes.
I know just curious.
Let me shift it back. I want to just shift it because we're going out of the bounds of the virtual chat. Because I understand what the Reverend was saying. It's in terms of Buddhist faith. We're talking about sort of faith and dealing with the issues, not necessarily a specific issue, but whatever issues out there, it's an internal response that has to happen. You have to, in order for you to even deal with it. And so a lot of what sort of the Dharma, can you explain to us what the Dharma is that you shared? I think that will kind of illuminate sort of what we're listening to and how everything becomes an internal process, not necessarily sort of what we're doing outside of our, the actual demonstrative part of it, but the internal work that happens with resilience, with Dharma. That's really where I want to center this conversation. Yeah, so if you can just return to that, that would be great.
The Dharma, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so the Dharma also speaks of non-self. There's this concept of non-self, but this concept of non-self is not a denial of this individuality. It's nor it's not the denial of our dignity as well, but it's the awareness of the whole. It's the awareness of the whole of life. So as long as we are attached to this self, yes, we'll see all the things, outside of ourselves. But by understanding the Dharma, so the Dharma, for me, the ultimate goal of the Dharma is that non-self, that yes, there is the self. I do exist here physically, but we are all interconnected, and I depend on others. Without others, I wouldn't even be here. Right. If you, Dora, if you didn't contact me, I wouldn't be here. And
yes, but if you didn't answer, you would be right. Yes.
Right. And also the today's participants.
Yes.
You make me exist. It's not that I exist. You. So we kind of depend on each other. This is non-self. This
That's
is what.
Yeah. And that's a hard concept, I think, especially in the West, where everything is it is very much individualized. It is so much about identity and self-identity and self-identifying, and sort of, and the boundaries that almost creates. So I definitely see, as you were explaining the Dharma, how it is really, it diffuses those kinds of boundaries. And so there is an interconnectedness, a natural interconnectedness within humanity.
Right. So, as I said, yes, exactly. So non-self is not a denial. So yes, people kind of misunderstand. And if they hear non-self, it's like, but non-self is not a denial of, individuality, nor of the dignity of the individual. So non-self is actually this liberation from the absolute I that is unaware of the whole of life.
Yes. It's very freeing. I thank you. I do thank you for your time. If you will, thank you for everyone who joined us.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes, if you can just close this out, just end this with sort of a thought or prayer of your choosing for today as we move forward with the rest of our days.
I'm sorry, I totally forgot about this.
It's okay. It is okay.
Okay. I'll do a reading.
Yes, sure.
So would you all join me in Gasho, which is putting your palms together? Listen to the Buddhist teaching, even if you must take time out from your daily business. To believe that you will listen when you have some spare time is shallow thinking. There is no tomorrow in listening to the teachings.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Reverend Hayashi. Again, you've blessed us with just your time and sharing of your thoughts. You're very humble from the moment I reached out to you, and it was very evident throughout our chat today. So thank you, everyone, for joining us, and you all have a wonderful day.
Thank you so much.